The astute among you are going to realize that this is, in fact, not Azalea Town, but a remix of Azalea Town that was put into Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, called Sevii Islands, Floe, and Chrono Islands, which I don't recall if that's 5 and 6 or sorry, 6 and 7, 4 and 5. I don't recall, but that is an interesting piece of knowledge, and I figured that I would use this the next time that I was going to talk about a Johto Pokemon. But you know what? The Johto specific Pokemon have to be some of the worst competitively. Well, other than Blissey, right? Just think about all the other Johto Pokemon. Like Miltank is okay, but not fantastic. Steelix okay, but not fantastic. Even the starters, it's like Typhlosion, for Alligator and Meganium are all pretty mediocre. But we're not here to talk about any of those. We're here to talk about Quagsire. And why do we want to talk about Quagsire? Well, because Quagsire is a funny little goober, and that's it gets clicks, alright? But no, there is some legitimate use case for Quagsire in Generation 3 OU. And as you can see here, the top players, their aggregate rankings, put Quagsire at number 43, which is above Blaziken. I actually saw a commenter responding to something from, I think, a question that I asked in a really long video ago, asking about this E rank, like which Pokemon are overrated, which Pokemon are underrated, and they said Donphan is underrated, and I agree, Donphan is underrated. Donphan's probably, like, definitely a top 50 Pokemon in my mind, but they said Quagsire was way overrated, and I said, well, I don't know. I mean, it does have some interesting applications for finding some use here, and we're going to talk about that. But of course, the comment question for today's video: if Swampert didn't exist in Gen 3, do you think that Quagsire would be OU ranked? I think that the water ground type, which we're going to talk about in some great detail here, is one of the best defensive types in this generation, possibly across time. I mean, I know that Steel Fairy is extremely good. I know that there are a handful of other types that have come since that have been really strong as well, but like in most formats, water ground is like a top 3 defensive type, and yeah, I mean, it definitely is the case that it is in Gen 3, so let's move on. Speaking of type effectiveness, we're going to be talking, or rather types in general, we're going to be talking about type effectiveness. So, I mean, this is pretty basic knowledge. I would assume that most people who are watching this probably already have a, like, intimate familiarity with the type chart, or at the very least you understand what the concept of it is. But just for those who are less initiated, I'm going to briefly explain that type effectiveness essentially applies a multiplier when a type attacks. So let's take, for example, fighting on the left column over here. We notice that if we go across this row where fighting is, we see normal has a 2x multiplier in it. What that means is that fighting type moves will do 2 times damage to a normal type Pokemon. So, and then fighting against fighting will be 1 times effective. Then fighting against flying, it seems, is half effective. So just keep going across this, and this will let you know. You'll see Ghost in the middle there, a 0 times. That means that Ghost is immune to fighting type moves. You can't hit a Ghost with a fighting type move. So how does that work for dual types where Pokemon have more than 1 type? Well, let's just take, for example, if you're fighting a normal flying type. Fighting's going to get multiplied by 2, and then multiplied by 1/2 to calculate damage against a normal flying type. So 2 times 1/2 is just 1. So it's essentially as if it's a neutral hit. But what if, say, you had against a rock ghost type? There is no rock ghost type in Gen 3 as far as I'm aware, but they exist later on, I think. Actually, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but just in theory, fighting would be 2 times effective on rock, but it's only 0 times effective on Ghost, so 2 times 0 is 0. So fighting is not going to be able to do anything to a rock Ghost type in theory. And then I have some other examples on the screen if you want to think about them more in the concrete example, like Ice Beam, specifically hitting Flygon, Camerupt, or Lapras. Oh, actually, I did that wrong. Lapras, 0.5 times 0.5 is 0.25. It says 0.5 there, but it should be 0.25. Whoopsies. In any case, let's talk about some Pokemon that have a low number of weaknesses. So, Mono Normal and Mono Electric are the only types that have just one weakness as far as that type is concerned. Normal is weak to fighting, Electric is weak to ground, and no type has 0 weaknesses. Every type has at least one. So, Normal and Electric are the only ones that are basically just mono types that only have one weakness, though. So, disregarding Mono Normal and Mono Electric types, the dual type Pokemon that have one weakness or less include all of these guys. So some of them are some Pokemon that you would see in OU, and some of them are some Pokemon that you see sometimes in OU, maybe they're UUBL, and then you also see Sableye there, who is loved by, or I should say beloved by, ABR. In fact, ABR thinks that it's better than Salamence. Well, actually, I don't know if he thinks that for sure, but he definitely does not like to use Salamence, and he does like to use Sableye on occasion. So, in any case, I've grouped these Pokemon up by what they're weak to, and we're going to start by explaining the top left, which would be Scizor and Fortress. Both of them are Bug Steel type. They only have one weakness, it's to fire, but it's a ×4 weakness, so it's going to do a lot of damage to them. Kingdra is only weak to Dragon, thanks to its Water Dragon type. Dragon is, in essence, only weak to Dragon and Ice, but Water covers the Ice weakness, and every one of Water's weaknesses, that being Grass and Electric, are covered by Dragon. So the only one that's left is Dragon itself, which is kind of interesting. Like, the only type that hits you for super effective is a type that you also hit back for super effective with your offensive capabilities, though granted, Kingdra does not have very good Dragon-type moves, so that might be kind of a moot point. Weezing technically is only weak to Psychic. Now, in actuality, it would be weak to Ground as well, but Weezing's ability to Levitate makes it immune to Ground, so surprisingly, it's only weak to Psychic. As generations go on, and you may end up wanting to use other of Weezing's abilities, like neutralizing gas, then that might not hold true. But in Generation 3, I believe, I don't recall if its only ability is Levitate or if its other ability is just horrible. I could believe either. Yeah, its only ability is Levitate, so no such thing to worry about here. I'm gonna skip over this middle section. Let's talk about Sableye. Sableye, as a Dark and Ghost type Pokemon, has no weaknesses. Ghost is only weak to Ghost and Dark, which Dark covers, and Dark is only weak to Fighting and Bug, which Ghost covers. So, yeah, it has no weaknesses. Now, that being said, Sableye has some problems defensively, like its stats are just not very high in general, and also it doesn't have a lot of resistances. I believe it's times 2 or ×4 resistant to poison. Let me pull up something to verify this. /weak Sableye. Oh, if you are ever wondering what a Pokemon's weaknesses are, you can look at in the Showdown chat, type in \weak space and then the Pokemon name, and it'll tell you what things that it resists. In fact, Sableye's only resistance is poison. It's not even a ×4. I don't know why I thought that it might be a ×4, but you only resist poison. You do have immunities to all of fighting, normal, and psychic, though, which is pretty nice to have, all things considered. Fighting is a decently common coverage type in this game, and also psychic and normal are seen somewhat commonly as stabs. Now for the group in the middle here, which is this block here, that's all weak to grass. Times 4 weak to grass because they're water ground type. But yeah, they've got some interesting other qualities, and we're going to talk about them more extensively on this slide. So the water ground types, being Swampert, Quagsire, and Whiscash, have this sort of block here, but we have a lot of information on here that we don't really need. Also, ignore fairy type. That doesn't exist in Generation 3. So let's simplify this down. So times 4 weakness to grass, immunity to electric, and resistance to poison, rock, steel, and fire. The ones that are notable in my mind are the rock and the steel resistance. That means that you're actually really good into some pretty strong metagame threats like Tyranitar, Aerodactyl, and Metagross, and you don't have to concede a ground weakness or even a fire weakness to do that, because the only other types of Pokemon that can do this are basically steel types, like Metagross, Jirachi, Fortress, and all of them, by virtue of being steel type, are weak to ground. And you could say, well, what about, say, Skarmory, who's immune to ground? And that's a good point, but Skarmory's not a rock resist because flying is weak to rock, so it's not super duper conducive to those matchups. Now, granted, its high defense stack kind of trumps everything, but it is good to note all of this, and that's why the water ground type is so valuable in Generation 3 in particular. But another reason is that the electric types have very bad coverage in Gen 3, other than, of course, our GOAT, Electabuzz, who has access to Ice Punch and Cross Chop. But they commonly will need to use HP Grass as their sole source of coverage because they don't get other good moves. That's true for Zapdos, Jolteon, and Raikou. So if those Pokemon do not choose HP Grass, then they don't really have a great way to hit the water ground types. HP Ice is neutral, but neutral HP with no stab and no super effectiveness is frankly pretty weak, especially if you have good defensive stats, which all of these Pokemon kind of do. But let's look at the comparison. Okay, I forgot to put some transition on the offensive profile, so I guess we'll talk about that first. We'll look at that. Swampert is the highest in both categories of physical attack and special attack. That is pretty notable, I'd say. And with a 110 attack stat, that's not even bad at all. Whereas Whiscash is sitting just below 80 on both, and Quagsire is sitting at an okay 85, but a pretty bad 65 on its special side. So, like, Swampert's the best mixed attacker. It's also the best physical attacker, which is what all the three of these Pokemon are technically the best at doing. Whiscash is basically, like, even, but I digress. Now let's take a look at the defensive profile. So, each of these Pokemon have pretty good HP stats. 100, 95, and 110 are all really nice. Now, 100 is a great benchmark to hit because it allows you to make substitutes that aren't killed by Seismic Toss if you invest entirely in your HP stat. Whiscash, because it has a little higher of an HP stat, doesn't necessarily have to go all the way, but it is technically possible, to go even higher with that. Although I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. It makes you bulkier to invest in your defenses with a Pokemon like Whiscash. But in any case, Swampert has the best just defensive bulk. Both its physical defense and special defense are 90, which is higher than either of the other two. And Quagsire is kind of sitting at a not so happy medium. I mean, its HP is still pretty good, but its defenses are a little bit on the lower side. Granted, I think that 95 HP, 85 defense is a little bit better at taking hits than 110 HP and 73 defense. But I mean, obviously, I'm going to be wrong about that, and somebody's going to correct me in the comment section. But if it's not, then it's pretty close between the two. And Whiscash having slightly higher speed def is notable in the Quagsire comparison. But then let's take a look at their speed. So both Whiscash and Swampert are actually speed tied at 60, which is kind of surprising. You would think Whiscash should be a little slower, but in fact it is not. Though Quagsire is sitting at a cool 35, which is really, really low. Not super duper conducive to outspeeding anything. There are a handful of things that you do outspeed naturally, but very few. So I think that kind of illustrates the point that Swampert is pretty clearly the best of these three. It's got the highest attack, defense, special attack, and special defense, and is tied for the highest speed out of all three. The only thing it is losing is in HP by all of 10 base points to Whiscash, but because it has higher defense and special defense to the degree that it does, I think that Swampert does take both physical and special hits better than Whiscash, assuming the same investment. So it's kind of like a moot point that Whiscash has higher HP. And also because Swampert has 100 HP, Whiscash doesn't even have the substitute advantage over Swampert, so such is the case for all these Pokemon. Oh, I misspelled Whiscash's name. That is embarrassing. You probably didn't even notice that until I pointed it out, huh? In any case, let's take a look at some of the moveset differences here. So, Swampert on the left, Quagsire in the middle, Whiscash on the right. And these are the moves that they all get that the other Pokemon do not get. Swampert, in gold, I have Endeavor and Refresh as moves that Swampert typically will use on its standard sets. Endeavor is, of course, a very particular set. Refresh is also a pretty particular set, but both of them get some decent use. You also have Mirror Coat and Seismic Toss on Swampert if you ever find the use for those. Mirror Coat maybe has some use cases, particularly in handling opposing offensive waters, whereas Seismic Toss I feel like probably doesn't have much of a use case on Swampert. I think you would rather just stick to your dual stabs. That's going to hit pretty much everything harder than the 100 damage from Seismic Toss. Quagsire in the middle has Ancient Power, Haze, and Sludge Bomb. Haze of these three is the most notable. There are not very many Pokemon in the format that have Haze, and Haze has a really cool effect that we'll talk about a little bit later. But Ancient Power and Sludge Bomb are kind of nice. Sludge Bomb for coverage is not super duper great. You only hit grass types for super effective, so that's basically just Celebi and Breloom. But you also have Ice Beam to hit those. Granted, because Quagsire has a much higher attack stat than its special attack, maybe Sludge Bomb would be of better use to you, and it has the 30% chance to poison, which can be really nice. But Quagsire is exclusively going to have to hit these Pokemon on Switch because it's going to lose 1v1, well, particularly to Celebi. Against Breloom, it kind of depends. If you have a Pokemon who's already sleep-sacked, maybe you can 1v1 with the Quagsire, but I mean, it's kind of not a unique situation with Quagsire, and also not a unique situation with it having Sludge Bomb over Ice Beam. I'm pretty sure Ice Beam will also 2-hit KO a Breloom, but I don't know, I haven't done the calc on it, so... Whiscash, unfortunately, does not really have anything that it can do that the other two can't. I mean, there may be a move or two, like, I don't know if both... both of these mons get Magnitude? I mean, whether they do or don't, they all get Earthquake, which is just better than Magnitude. So, like, there aren't any real, like, actual moves that Whiscash gets that the other two don't. But I want to note that Quagsire does not get Rock Slide, so if you're not using HP Rock, you're going to be relying on Ancient Power as your rock coverage, and Swampert doesn't get Amnesia, but, you know, of course, Quagsire does. Whiscash does get both of these moves, though, so if you want to do something with Rock Slide and Amnesia on a Seth, then you may have to be looking at Whiscash to enable you to do that. So that might be something. But yeah, again, I think that Swampert's got the better moves here. If it had Haze, then it would be really tough to justify using the other two over Swampert. But I'm here to make the case for why you might want to use Quagsire in particular. So why would you want to use Quagsire or Whiscash over Swampert? Haze is a pretty legit option for undoing progress against stat boosters. What it does is it resets all stats on the field. So that means that if you're up against, say, like a Calm Mind Suicune or something, you can go for Haze and just negate all of its stat boosts. It also will help you out if, say, your Quagsire gets intimidated. You can Haze and then eliminate that attack drop. Although, I will say, as far as hazers go, Quagsire is a little bit limited in this role, because it has a pretty mediocre bulk, particularly on the special side, and because it has a lack of recovery, that limits its staying power, versus, like, competent stat boosters that you'll be up against. So, say, things like Celebi, who, well, for one, if it has a grass move, then it's kiss your Quagsire goodbye. But even if it doesn't, you're not taking very many psychics with Quagsire as compared to a bulkier Pokemon like Weezing, who, well, that's a bad example because you're getting smashed by psychic there too. But yeah, or even something like Suicune, for example, if it has Ice Beam or HP Grass coverage, well, of course, HP Grass, but Ice Beam coverage, it can beat down the Quagsire even without Calm Mind boosts. So, Jirachi's another great example with Ice Punch or Psychic coverage of its own. In any case, it's still an option, and it can be good in a pinch. If you don't have, say, your Roar Pokemon available, then you can allow Quagsire to get in and haze something that gets out of control. Although I would say it's probably even better on the physical side, roaring or hazing curse users like Snorlax and potentially things that are getting out of control, like a boosting Metagross, like Agility Slash with its Meteor Mash boosts. And Quagsire has the ability combination of Damp and Water Absorb, which gives it immunities that Swampert does not have access to, which we will be talking about soon. Though, I think you're probably asking, what do we do with Whiscash in this tier? I mean, I hate to say that a Pokemon has no use case. I'm trying to advocate for some more creative uses of certain Pokemon. But Whiscash, I mean, the only thing that it does, like its ability Oblivious, just means that it can't be infatuated. So if Attract ever becomes a staple of the metagame, before it gets banned, we can use Whiscash to block the Attract, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I guess unless you have some idea to use Amnesia, then there's just not a way for you to justify using Whiscash over Swampert. Yeah, in any case, we're here to talk about Quagsire some more, and we're going to look at its abilities. So sorry for the horrendous pixel quality of these top two, but it looked better when I wasn't looking at it, I guess. Damp on the left is going to stop the move's Explosion and Self-Destruct from being able to activate. What that means is that Quagsire has the ability to wall Metagross, whether it has Rock Slide or Boom. There are a lot of Pokemon who can handle Metagross as long as it doesn't Boom, but Damp means that Quagsire doesn't have to worry about the Boom. Now, EQ still hits for a decent chunk, that's not to be understated, but Quagsire has some ideas to mitigate that type of damage, which we will be talking about again shortly. But That's kind of an interesting application. You can also use it to help you with Claydol and Fortress, who are kind of not really hitting Quagsire for that much damage. Psychic and Earthquake from Claydol are not quite enough to 2-hit KO. Fortress can't even really 3-hit KO. Sometimes it'll fail to 4-hit KO. So, yeah, I mean, that's not fantastic. So, for those Pokemon, in the case that the Quagsire has Damp, and if you've never seen it happen before, because I know that Damp is a very, like, rare ability in Gen 3 OU. What it does essentially is if the Pokemon clicks Explosion, the ability Damp will pop up and basically like negate it. So it's not like a Ghost type coming into it where the explosion will happen and the opponent dies and you don't take any damage. It just like basically eats the turn for your opponent, which is still good. Gives you a free turn you can do a lot with, but it's not quite as good as being a Ghost type. Water Absorb is the ability that kind of gives Quagsire its niche here, I'll be honest. Damp is not super duper commonly seen, but I did want to mention it because I do think there are some underutilized applications for Damp, particularly on Pokemon who have this Water Absorb versus Damp duality. Like, for example, Poliwrath. I saw a Poliwrath in a tournament game do something very nasty to Metagross, who had no move really to take it out, which was kind of interesting. So maybe you could do the same with Quagsire, but Water Absorb really is the bread and butter for Quagsire. This is going to punish all the mono water attackers, so the common sets in Gen 3 OU that do only have one attacking move, and that attacking move is a water type move. Would be Surf Defensive Swampert, whose only other move that can do anything is Toxic, because its other two moves are going to be Protect and Refresh. Same with non-Ice Beam Milotic, who's also got the same idea: Surf, Toxic, Recover, and Refresh, because Recover is quite a bit nicer than Protect. And then there are many Suicune sets that are only running Surf as its attacking move. Crocoon, which is the Rest Talk version. Vincoon, which is the Sub-CM version. I think I've also seen Vincoon used to describe Protect and Roar instead of Substitute. Though if I'm incorrect on that, please correct me in the comment section. Toxic Suicune is not generally running another attacking move. Now what you'll notice is that all these Pokemon have Toxic, which will hit the Quagsire, but we can deal with Toxic by using Rest to remove the status, and it also does a really good job at stalling PP against the opponents, because Rest has 16 PP, but you're not able to do anything for 2 turns effectively. So that is, every time you click Rest, you're wasting 3 turns, which means that you effectively can waste up to 48 turns, which is good in some endgame scenarios. Say you're up against a Last Mon Milotic and Quagsire is the only thing you can use to beat it, then this is an option for you. Now, there's also Starmie will sometimes run only Surf as its attacking move. Particularly the defensive Starmie set will have Rapid Spin, Surf, Recover, and Thunder Wave. Now, technically, Rapid Spin does hit Quagsire, but it hits it for so little damage, it's hardly even worth noting. So you can beat that set as well, just by virtue of being a Quagsire with Water Absorb. So we'll move on to talk about the Smogon sets. So both of these are classified as UU sets, but if you read all of the write-ups that give some context for these sets, you'll actually see that they're kind of leftovers from really old Smogon, when we used to call OU standard play and things like that, talking about your matchup against Donphan and Aerodactyl, even though those Pokemon have nothing to do with UU. but I sort of digress. These are the sets that you'll see. Counter, Earthquake, Toxic, and Surf, or you could run Haze or Ice Beam instead of the last two moves. This is a set that has some ideas to come in versus physical attackers like Metagross, like Tyranitar, like Aerodactyl. Bait out a hit from them and then go for counter to kill them back. You also have Earthquake to help you hit Tyranitar and Jirachi, who are not going to cooperate with your counter shenanigans. It also will hit Metagross, but yeah, I guess it would. It could. If the Metagross, but the Metagross doesn't really have a way to play around counter in most cases, unless it's going to agility forever. So I don't know about that. I do think for this particular set, the counter one, you could run Damp instead of Water Absorb if you want to be more particular about handling Metagross. But there is still definitely utility in Water Absorb. It gives you opportunities to come in and not immediately lose to things like Suicune, etc. Though I will say, defensive Suicune is liable to not get 3-hit KO'd by Earthquake with this kind of attack investment. So you are either going to need a lot more attack investment or some way to boost your attack in order to handle Suicune in the end game. Otherwise, you're just going to run out of Earthquakes before you can even do anything to the Suicune, and then yeah, there's not much you can do. Now, granted, you can keep switching back and forth between Quagsire and some other Pokemon on your team to try to PP stall the Suicune, but like that's only going to work but so well if there are like no spikes on your side of the field, if your other Pokemon isn't getting worn down by sand, etc., etc. So keep that in mind, that this counter set is not a counter to Suicune. Curse is not exactly a counter to Suicune. Well, it kind of depends. If the Suicune doesn't have any other attacking move, the Curse set is much better at beating Suicune. In fact, I guess you could call that a counter, because what is Suicune going to do versus this? It has to switch. But like any Pokemon that doesn't trap, the jig is kind of up when there's a switch. Now, the ideal with this set is that Quagsire is bulky enough to handle a lot of the things that could switch in. So you might be able to get a boosted Earthquake or Ice Beam off against those Pokemon that switch in at not so much cost to yourself. Or that the opponent does not have a good physical attacker that can break through you after getting a Curse boost. So that's the sort of idea there. This particular set would prefer Water Absorb because that's the idea. You want to be able to not lose to Suicune. The sort of counter example, since this set is not using Haze, which is one of the unique moves that Quagsire gets as compared to Swampert, is that if you are not Water Absorb, then, like, well, why not just do the same thing with Swampert? Swampert gets Curse, it gets Earthquake, Ice Beam, Rest, Surf, can run HP Rock if it wants. Like, you could just do the same thing with Swampert and have more stats. But Water Absorb is the linchpin here that keeps you immune to Water-type moves, so you can still beat bulky Waters and offensive Waters who are only running basically Surf or Hydro Pump as their attacking move, although Mono Hydro Pump is extremely insane. In any case, though, while I do think this Curse set is interesting, I think it needs a little bit of an update, so here's what I'm proposing. Is to run a little bit more attack and take a little bit out of your special defense and allocate it to the defense instead. Now, I do think there are reasons to run a lot of special defense. In particular, it will help you against something like a Calm Mind Blissey using Ice Beam against you. It can also help with the 2 attacks variant of Suicune that is running Ice Beam as coverage. But these EVs are kind of designed to help us out a little bit more against the Pokemon that Quagsire is already pretty good into. It basically tightens up those matchups for us. So the EQ ranges that really matter are, if we're at +2, we'll 3-hit KO Suicune through leftovers, which is really good to know, because we can't always guarantee that we're going to have sand up. There may be a possibility that our opponent is able to clear it, and in particular with the Quagsire team that I'm going to show, I'm leading with Tyranitar, so if they lead Dugtrio and get the kill on my Tyranitar, then they could probably weather clear later. In any case, with a mere +2, we don't have to worry about Suicune stalling out our Quagsire. This is, of course, the defensive Suicune. On offensive Suicune, we're going to have better rolls against. With +2, we will OHKO every Tyranitar, which is really nice to know. That also means that if we don't have any boost, we will 2-hit KO most Tyranitar. I think we still get them through their leftovers chip healing, but it's possible that that's not the case for some Tyranitar out there. In any case, we have a 68.8% chance at +2 to OHKO a bulky meta, and with +1 we have the exact same odds to KO a CB meta if it takes spikes damage. So that could be important to know. Say the Metagross comes in, it's choice band, it doesn't want to click boom on our +1 Quagsire for whatever reason. It's going to go just for Earthquake to get some damage. Well, we have in our favor odds to just kill it back with Earthquake, so that could be nice. It also means that CB meta is not necessarily safe to switch in on Quagsire if it has a +1 boost and there's a spike down. So yeah, again, a lot of things have to kind of go right for you there, but it's not very much attack investment. Now, granted, the plus nature is maybe more than you might be willing to commit. You maybe want plus defense. Maybe you want plus special defense to have, a lot of special defense on your Quagsire, and that's totally fine. I encourage you to play around with the EVs on this set yourself to figure out what best fits your team. Arguably, this might not be the best fit for my team. Maybe less defense, more Spadef, because I already have a lot of Metagross answers, but the idea behind this is that we will live 1 unboosted and 2 boosted Meteor Mashes from Metagross, which means that we can switch in on a Meteor Mash. Metagross could get the raise, and then we can still get 2 Earthquakes off on Metagross. Now, granted, we don't always kill Metagross with 2 Earthquakes, particularly if it has leftovers, but it gives us some opportunity if we want to go for it. It means we could also Curse and then Earthquake if the Metagross is in range for Curse plus Earthquake to get there. And then also, of course, the Metagross could just miss one of its Meteor Mashes, and that is going to help us out a lot if such a thing happens. We will also avoid a 2-hit KO from a +1 Blissey Ice Beam, so Calm Mind Blissey might be an idea to try to take out this Quagsire, but since we don't get 2-hit KO'd, and we will 2-hit KO them back with our +1 Earthquake, then Quagsire is usually going to win that matchup. Now, of course, freeze and crit chances can sway the odds, but generally speaking, Quagsire wins. And especially if we're in sand. If we're not in sand, then technically if Quagsire min rolls twice, then Blissey can survive, but I mean, it's virtually not going to happen. And if the Blissey ever decides to go into a recover loop, like a soft-boiled loop, to not die to the next Earthquake, you're getting your leftovers back. You can always go for another Curse, and then you'll outpace their healing, and then it's over for the Blissey. So that's pretty good. Notably, we are only 95 speed, which means we're basically not going to outspeed anything. Even Snorlax tends to run 99 speed, and if it doesn't run any speed investment, I think it hits 96. So like we're not even outspeeding Snorlax. There may be some Pokemon that are also running a minus speed nature that we could get past. Like, I guess if Snorlax is running a minus speed nature, we're faster than that, but like, no, there's virtually nothing that we're gonna outspeed with Quagsire, so don't worry about that. if you want to run a little bit of speed, I guess you could. But, like, what do you even outspeed? I'm not sure. You could opt to do a minus special attack nature. If you don't necessarily care about Ice Beam damage, I want to note that Ice Beam is here so that we have a move to hit Salamence and Flygon, but we don't OHKO either of them. So it's not necessarily a counter to either of them. And in particular, a mixed Salamence with HP Grass is going to do a lot of damage to Quagsire, and I think in many cases it will kill. But like, yeah, it's not fantastic. So keep that in mind. It's good to click on switch in if you think that the Salamence is going to switch in to try to stop your curse sweep. Then you can hit it and then do a massive amount of damage, and then it's going to have to decide whether it's going to stay in and risk getting killed by Ice Beam or have to switch out, in which case your curse boosts are kind of preserved. And then Flygon really, like, Flygon doesn't have a great move to hit Quagsire, short of like Giga Drain, but that's insane. Don't do that. So yeah, and then Rest is just fantastic at shrugging off the toxics from the slower pace Pokemon that are going to try to wear down the Quagsire. So yeah, now this is a set that Swampert can pull off, and arguably Swampert can pull it off better, but like, the reason why we use Quagsire is because of Water Absorb. It's better against these mono attacking water types. So, and it's still good enough into things like your Tyranitar and your Metagross that the fall off, I think, in those particular matchups is not quite as bad. So, like, you can still accomplish some of the key things that Swampert needs to do, while also helping you out against the mono waters. Now, that's not to say that I think that Quagsire is better. There are plenty of neutral matchups that Swampert could play into that Quagsire can't really, because it has just worse stats. And you also don't have Hydro Pump, I don't think, on Quagsire. Even if you do, well, this Quagsire certainly doesn't. So that's definitely something to note. But nevertheless, let's show the team. So this is a team that I came up with not too long ago. Of course, completely original idea. That's why I call it El Plástico. But no, El Plástico is sort of my take on H-Class El Clásico team. That's why I named it as such. Of course, if you're not familiar with Spanish, El Clásico means the classic. El Plástico means the plastic. So that's kind of the pun there. In any case, I think the joke just got a lot worse because I explained it, but whatever. The idea is that we can afford to use Moltres instead of Zapdos because we have a water immunity in Quagsire. Now, does that mean that we're good into these Starmies and these Suicune teams and all that? Not exactly. Quagsire is a Pokemon that can only do but so much, and because we don't have a spinner on this team, it can easily get worn down by spikes. So it's not going to be a super duper like world beater on all water types, but it does have a little bit of surprise factor and how should I say, ability to duel water types in some cases that I'm not too worried about not having another water weakness on this team. Now, granted, El Clásico, because it doesn't have a dedicated special wall like Blissey or Celebi, because El Clásico is this exact same structure. You just have Zapdos instead of Moltres and Swampert instead of Quagsire. Like, it also doesn't have a great switch into water moves, and arguably it's even worse into just a random Hydro Pump. Which, yeah, is one of the sort of flaws of the team. Not every team's going to be perfect, but I mean, certainly El Clásico is a usable team. I mean, H-Cloud has gotten plenty of great tournament results and ladder success using that team, and many others have found a lot of ladder success using El Clásico. I would recommend that you check it out. But if you're bored of El Clásico, you want a little bit of extra spice, or you're particularly worried about your matchup into a mono Suicune, last month Suicune ruined your day when you were playing El Clásico, then consider this El Plástico version. So there are going to be a lot of similarities to El Clásico. If you're familiar with how that team plays, then this is going to play pretty similarly. But we have a lead bulky DD Tar, which will help us start a game strong against Zapdos, which is one of the better Pokemon into our team. You could probably notice a Thunderbolt plus HP Grass Zapdos is going to do a lot of work against us. But we also have Double Edge on this Tyranitar, which will help us in the case that Zapdos baton passes to Dugtrio. If there is a lead Dugtrio, well, we can also usually trade and kill that as well. Not that Dugtrio is super duper concerning for our team, because most of our Pokemon are birds, but like meaning that they're immune to Dugtrio trapping. But I mean, it's nice to not give Dugtrio just like a freebie, you know, like at least hit back, you know. And if you can eliminate it with Double Edge, then all the better. But we have 4 Spike immunities in Skarmory, Aerodactyl, Gengar, and Moltres, and that affords us the luxury of not requiring a spinner for this team. Though, I would not consider this a Superman team, Superman being this archetype that stacks a lot of Spike immunities so that you don't have to play against spikes quite the same way that other teams do. I'm not going to explain exactly why I don't think El Clásico or this version El Plástico are, or why I think that they're not Superman teams, but I may discuss that in a later video. We'll see. Maybe I'll do like the alignment chart of Superman, so let me know if you want to see that. Gengar, of course, is our spin blocker. Moltres is our Will-O-Wisp. We could have had Will-O-Wisp on Gengar, but I'm opting to not. And Arrow is a cleaner, and they're all super duper fast and pretty strong. Well, I guess Moltres is not super duper fast, but it's faster than the neutral base 100, so that's fast enough in my books. And that will do it for this portion. We will be back for the battles shortly. Okay, I have resisted the urge to use a battle theme. I've expanded my horizons here, and I'm actually going to use Great Marsh from Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum as the background music for this, which I think is fine, because even though it's not a battle theme, it is a really, really cool song. I think it's one of my more favorite songs in Gen 4. It's not my favorite per se, because Gen 4's got some great music, but I can't recall if in the Q&A somebody asked me what my favorite generation of Pokemon music is, but I think Gen 4 would probably be my answer. I do like Gen 3, I do like Gen 5, don't get me wrong. And then the modern games also have some select tracks that are bangers, but in any case, Gen 4 is great. Let's talk about the game now, though. We have Lead Tar versus Lead Tar. My Tar is faster, given the Sandstream going first. That's important to note when you're in a Tyranitar versus Tyranitar matchup. Sometimes looking for who gets their Sandstream to activate is going to be the determining factor of what you would do in this matchup. So based on that, I can only assume that this Tyranitar is Pursuit, who does not have a good move to hit me. I mean, it has Brick Break sometimes. Actually, in many cases it does, but that's not going to KO my Tyranitar, which is fine. Or it's BKC Tar, which is usually like slow with Focus Punch. So I will opt to go for Earthquake because I think that I can 2-hit KO a BKC Tar, and this Tar opts to go for Focus Punch, so that's great for me. And now I'm threatening to KO. They're probably going to have to switch. I'm still going to go for the Earthquake assuming that they would want to switch into something like a Swampert, who can be a little bit difficult for this team sometimes, but just like that, we managed to see the Swampert. We'll see if I decide I want to get spikes or sack, or I should say trade. I guess I decide to go to Scarm. There are some cases where you may want to play aggressive against a Swampert and just trade off your Tyranitar for the sake of beating the Swampert, because otherwise, like, Quagsires are our only answer, which is not great. I do take a Focus Punch with my Quagsire, just like that, and then Earthquake into his Scarm, which is not going to be helpful for us. One of the problems of Quagsire in particular is that it really has nothing that it can do against Skarmory. Skarmory's just simply going to get as many spikes as it wants. But that's why we pair it on this team that has a lot of spike immunities, because, okay, if it gets some spikes up, we can still play around that. I want to note that Skarmory used Hidden Power and did a lot of damage to our Gengar. I think that's a Hidden Power Steel Skarm, which is really insane. In my opinion, if you're going to use HP Steel, you might as well use Steel Wing, because you might get that defense boost and that might matter. But I guess it also has a chance to miss, so kind of whatever. In any case, I'm just going to keep staying in with the Gengar. I'll Ice Punch into the Zapdos, who actually goes for Toxic, which is basically Christmas morning for me, because I can go for another Ice Punch. If Skarmory comes in, alright, great. I can just T-Bolt, and the Skarmory is dead. Swampert's not a great switch in either, because I revealed Hidden Power Grass, and Tyranitar is low enough that I can 1v1 it. Or at least trade into it for very positive damage. In any case, the Aerodactyl affords me the opportunity to go to Skarmory and get a spike up. I will protect in the face of Gengar, because I know that Gengar is not really going to have anything to beat Skarmory too badly. Short of, like, Substitute, but even then, Substitute Gengar is very rare. I can go to Gengar, take a Will-O-Wisp, and crit with Thunderbolt, which is very fortunate. I die, but the Gengar is very low, which means that Aerodactyl can come in and threaten it with whatever it wants. I go for Rock Slide because it's the best move to hit Zapdos. It would hit Tyranitar switching in as well. But yeah. Granted, we are HP Bug on this Aerodactyl, so that's really the only move that is of any consideration to hit the Gengar with now that it's that low. Otherwise, we would have had to click Rock Slide anyway. Quagsire is going to come in, go for a Earthquake into the Gengar, which does nothing. But, notably, we dodged a Toxic. Isn't that kind of cool? Moltres will just go for a Flamethrower, get some decent chip into the Aerodactyl. Importantly, this means that we limit Aerodactyl switch-ins just a little bit more here. I go for a Protect to get out of Rock Slide range. I maybe could have went for a Spike there, it would have been an aggressive play, but I think that Protect there was ultimately fine. I'm going to go back to Skarmory, assuming that my opponent maybe would want to click Double Edge, but it's probably not a great assumption. At this stage, I probably could have sacked Quagsire, but Quagsire has Rest, so it can get out of that. My opponent is going to miss a Rock Slide as I go for Drill Peck, which gets a little bit of extra damage on the Aerodactyl. Not too much, but now anything that would be like in the 2-hit KO range against Aerodactyl will just straight up kill it, which might include Quagsire's Ice Beam. I don't recall exactly, but I imagine, given that I went to Quagsire, it probably did. In any case, Quagsire can duel against the Swampert here, because once the Swampert goes down, then I can really just click Rock Slide as much as I want with my Aerodactyl. Given that I knew that the Swampert was going to go for Protect, I go for Rest on the Quagsire, and then do a hard double to Tyranitar, trying to catch Zapdos coming in, but instead I catch Gengar. I'll just take the kill on Gengar, and I managed to dodge a Will-O-Wisp, which basically seals the game. Had the Will-O-Wisp hit, I still probably would have been okay, because like I'll still probably kill the Zapdos unless it's like Rest Zap, but if it's Rest Zap, then that's affording me opportunities to get to Moltres or Aerodactyl that otherwise would not be available. It also means that like Aerodactyl, if I decide I want to stay in versus it, I don't know if I'd live in Earthquake, but I could get some really strong damage on it, so then I can simply go for Double Edge to win the game rather than Rock Slide, which could be nice. And then yeah, the Swampert is low enough with all the spikes up, and I have Double Edge. I think I'd be fine. I can probably find a way to kill a Swampert at that low range. So the Will-O-Wisp, maybe not like game. Maybe it wouldn't have won my opponent the game, but it would certainly lost my opponent the game to not hit it. So yeah, that's enough for that. We will go on to the next game. Colder White Mane sounds like some like fantasy area. I do have the Sandstream up on my side, so I am faster. I can go for an Earthquake, and I catch the Swampert coming in. Swampert is a very, very common switch into Tyranitar on lead, as I'm sure you are mostly aware if you've been playing with Tyranitar lead teams. I can simply go for Spikes though, as this Skarmory goes for Thief, which is not ideal. I would prefer my Skarmory to have leftovers, but that means I can get to 3 spikes before my opponent can get to 2. So I can switch to Moltres and force this out. We'll see a Blissey. This is looking like a big 5 team. I go for Will-O-Wisp, which would have been nice to hit on the Blissey, because it would have forced the Blissey to switch out eventually. I mean, it's probably going to be forced to switch out eventually anyway. But Spikes plus Sand plus Burn is a good way to chip out a Blissey for a team that doesn't have like a Dugtrio to trap the Blissey / like Focus Punch on literally every Pokemon. In any case, I can get a DD up, and I get a crit flinch on the Skarmory, which is extremely fortunate. It means that I can go for Double Edge and finish off the Skarm, which is really nice. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of tough. I go to Quagsire here on the Swampert, hoping to take an Earthquake, but in fact it goes for Surf. And because it went for Toxic, that tells me that it's a Mono Pert, this is exactly the situation we want our Quagsire to be in. So I go for Ice Beam, trying to catch a Zapdos, assuming that this might be a big 5 Zapdos, but this is actually Beer Lover. It's going to go to Starmie and spin all my spikes away, but it's going to cost the entire Starmie to get there. Quagsire is down to 74%. I can save it. I'll go to Aerodactyl, who should live in Ice Punch, is what I was thinking, and yes, I do. Now I'll go for Rock Slide. It's going to be strong damage on the Gengar, and if I get the flinch, then I simply am going to get Rock Slide on presumably a Swampert switch, which is nice for me. I go to my own Gengar to scare this Gengar out, and then double to Tyranitar to catch the Blissey switch. Now I'm going to go to Skarmory on a triple out to get my Spike up, which is going to be fantastic because I need Spikes up to beat down this Blissey and Swampert in the end game. Since the Gengar is low enough, I will go for a Drill Peck to kill it, which affords me the opportunity to get Spikes on something else. Tyranitar comes in, and I figure, well, the only way I could probably lose to Tyranitar is if I let it Dragon Dance right now. So I'm going to Roar it out, in fact. And then with the Blissey in, I'm simply going to take the second Spike. And now that Blissey's in, this is actually easier for me to deal with than, say, if Tyranitar was in. That means that I can go to my own Tyranitar, and I can Earthquake, which would have threatened to 2-hit KO the Blissey. It also hits Tyranitar on switch in and does decent enough damage to the Swampert. Swampert is going to go for Toxic as I go to Quagsire, who is already Toxic. I'm going to Curse on the Protect turn. We'll see if this Swampert decides to stay in. It does, and goes for Toxic as I go for Rest. And now I'm in a really good spot. The Blissey can come in, but the Blissey has to do 3 things. It has to Soft Boil to heal up, so it's out of Earthquake range. It has to Calm Mind to boost the damage of its Ice Beam, and then it has to Ice Beam me. And it can't do all those things before I wake up. So I wake up and I get my Earthquake off, and Ice Beam wouldn't even kill if it's a crit. So I only care about getting frozen, really. But now that the Blissey is dead, simply my Moltres can win the game. I will certainly kill the Swampert, and, well, the Tyranitar could be a little bit of a problem, but I think that ultimately I do have the tools to win from there. And even the Swampert, like, the Swampert can't really force the Quagsire out because it has Surf and Toxic. So I can simply just go to plus however much I want with the Quagsire and then rest. And then with my defense boosts, I should be able to weather the Tyranitar, Earthquake it out. And if Tyranitar is the immediate switch, well, I can simply just Earthquaking, if not kill it, then like extremely heavily chip it so that Moltres, of course, can win in the end game. So yeah, that's Quagsire is quite good for that. Now, granted, there are going to be some cases where maybe Swampert could have accomplished a similar goal, but I do argue, though, that completely walling the opposing Swampert is kind of nice for this team. There were a lot of times where my opponent could have clicked Surf, but opted not to because I think they were afraid of giving the Quagsire the Water Absorb health back, whereas if I had Swampert, they would have played in such a way to fire off the free Surfs, and eventually they should beat down my Swampert, or force it to rest at the very least, in which case they can use their special attackers to potentially win. Now, granted, I do think that Curse Swampert would have a pretty good matchup into a Beer Lover team like this, but I sort of digress. We're up against the Chungus of God, which has got to be one of the worst showdown names I've ever seen. We need to gatekeep this metagame from Zoomers, okay? Well, okay, particular Zoomers. If you were born after Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire came out, you're gonna have to get approved by an Unk to play this metagame, alright? That's what I'm saying. And if there's an Unk out there that's gonna approve the Chungus of God as a nickname, I'm gonna have to play you in a best of 3 to revoke your Unk status. Don't put me to that. I will get slammed by somebody who actually knows what they're doing. Lead Tyranitar versus Lead Zapdos, a very common lead matchup, and we'll see a Baton Pass as I go for a Dragon Dance. Probably should have went for a Double Edge instead, because I'm forced out, because I don't necessarily want to sack my entire Tyranitar this early, just to get damage on Swampert. That might not even stick. But I can go for a Spike against a Starmie switch, and switch to my Spin Blocker, which, well, it's not great. The Starmie is going to reveal Psychic, and it gets the drop on my Quagsire, so okay. Doing something weird here. I'm going to stay in and go for Earthquake, assuming now that the Starmie is going to go for Spin, but I also could have lived another Psychic if they went for it. Simply we'll go for another Earthquake, catch a Celebi switching in for not very much damage, but I can always go back to Skarmory here and threaten to Spike again. They're going to Baton Pass to Starmie, but that's fine by me. They're going to get some Leech Seed Chip, which is going to take them out of range of a Earthquake for my Quagsire, but I can go to Tyranitar here. And given that the moveset so far has been Thunderbolt, Psychic, Rapid Spin, I'm thinking that it's a possibility that the Starmie does not have a water move. It might have Ice Beam as its last move, which would be kind of insane, but it is possible. So, in any case, the Starmie did not want to stay in versus the Tyranitar, but I can get my Spike up a turn earlier now on this loop, which means that I can switch out before the Starmie gets in. No Leech Seed recovery for it. Sorry if that was kind of scatterbrained there, but in any case, Moltres is going to Flamethrower an incoming Zapdos, who reveals to be faster based on sand damage. I was talking to somebody earlier today. We were doing a little bit of team building and laddering, and they said, oh, max speed Zapdos is not that common anymore. And I say, you know, I like a modest Zapdos as well, but I do think there are a lot of Zapdos still running max speed, especially in the lead slot. So important to know that, because Moltres can beat Zapdos one-on-one if the Zapdos is running Modest. As long as it catches the Zapdos on switch with Flamethrower, then it can get the 2-hit KO. So, important to know. We're just doing some positioning here to get my Skarmory back in. I keep wanting to get the Spike up, because every turn that this Starmie is in and clicking Rapid Spin is like a turn that I can get to another Pokemon to try to make some progress. But in fact, I can go for a Drill Peck here and eliminate the Starmie just outright. Now, any spikes that I get presumably are going to stay up the whole game. So I can just switch back and forth between Quagsire and Gengar here. I think there's some interesting utility there, but my opponent does call me out there and goes for a Thunderbolt into my Gengar. If it went for a Hidden Power Grass, then certainly I would have lived that with Gengar. Now I'm threatening to kill it with Ice Punch. Nothing really wants to come in on an Ice Punch. I mean, even if Swampert comes in, now I can HP Grass that. Granted, we could see a switch to Celebi to stop that, but it's still in my favor for all that to happen. Against the Zapdos, I'm opting to go for Double Edge into potentially the Swampert, but we instead reveal a Tyranitar, which is fine. I have the whole Quagsire to switch in, and it seems to be a Toxic Tyranitar. Not super duper common, but it's definitely a set. I'll go for an Ice Beam into the Tyranitar as it Toxics me, and then an Earthquake on the Celebi switch. So I kind of got gamed on those 2 turns, but it's not ultimately that big a deal, because anytime the Celebi comes in is a turn I can get a Spike up. So that is A-okay with me. Zapdos is slowly healing back up, but I can simply just go to Quagsire. They have never predicted me with the HP Grass onto the Quagsire. I'm thinking at this point they may not have it, so I'll lead the Quagsire in to try to Ice Beam, but I end up getting cooked. In any case, it's not a big deal, because I can go to Aerodactyl, and I get a Rock Slide into the Swampert, so I keep messing up my predictions here. But Swampert coming in is fine, because I can just go to Scarm and get my layers, but it crits me with Surf. That's not good, although my Skarmory still lives, which is fine, but I'm gonna have to sack the entire Skarmory to get the 3rd layer down. I do think it's worth it, though, as Moltres can come in, and I can go for a HP Grass into the Swampert. Dugtrio is going to come in. It's just going to get sacked. I mean, that is what it is. It could have been useful for my Tyranitar, but I mean, I guess it's not super duper useful into the Moltres and Aerodactyl, though. I will go to Tyranitar now, and I will Earthquake into the opposing Tyranitar. It's going to Earthquake me and just be shy of killing me, which is a little bit unfortunate, I guess, but I mean, we both had the same roll. I think we were both bulky DD, or at least we were both had that sort of spread. I don't know if this was a DD Tyranitar with Toxic. In any case, now I can go for Double Edges, and yeah, I mean, there's just nothing that can really switch into that. Swampert is in. I will go to Moltres, who takes a Surf and lives it, which is quite nice for us. And all I have to do really is get damage on the Swampert. In fact, Flamethrower damage would have been enough, I think, to put it into range of Double Edge. But if it switches out, then clearly I have enough damage. Because it's going to take 25 from the spikes. And I would have outsped Zapdos and killed that too with Double Edge, I think. But the Flamethrower does catch the Zapdos on switch in, which is really nice. It makes me look like a god. Maybe the Chungus of God. Okay, yeah, that was terrible. It sounded bad in my head, and it sounded even worse when I said it. And then finally, we have a game against Wild Rumpus, who is gotta be one of my favorite people to run into on ladder, because I know that Wild Rumpus watches my videos, and I want to know, Wild Rumpus, when you face me on ladder, are you like, oh man, am I about to get put in another video? Or do you not care? That'd be something I'm interested in knowing. But in any case, I've picked this because it showcases what Quagsire can do, not because, not for any other reason really. We have a lead Skarmory, so I'm gonna go for a Dragon Dance. And then go for a Rock Slide. This is a classic maneuver by me because I tend to find that if you can get a crit or a flinch off of the +1 Rock Slide, then the Skarmory is like really hampered for the rest of the game. I'll go for a Will-O-Wisp, trying to catch whatever would be the switch in, and it happens to be a Blissey, which is not the best target, but it's not a bad target. It's going to set up a Wish and presumably get it back to Skarmory. In fact, it's not going to. It's going to stay in and get some Seismic Toss damage on me, which allows me to get a Spike for not too much cost. I'll go for another Spike, because why not, as Gengar comes in. And I'm going to Protect, because, like I said, the worst thing that Gengar could do to Skarmory protecting is probably Substitute, but like Substitute is extremely rare. Given that my opponent wants to get the burn on my Skarm, I'm going to go for the third layer. It's possible that Wild Rumpus here is running a Big 5 team and doesn't have the faculties to spin, particularly if it's like a Big 5 Zapdos. In any case, I can go to Quagsire here as predicting the Swampert to go for a water move, but instead it goes for Protect, but that's fine. I'll go for Ice Beam, predicting a switch to Gengar or potentially Skarmory, but instead my opponent goes for Toxic and misses. Somewhat consequential, because I would have had to rest a lot earlier, but I do have rest to play around that, so it's not the worst thing in the world. I go for Ice Punch into the Protect and then try to Hidden Power Grass, seeing if my opponent is going to call my bluff, or thinks that I'm bluffing it. In any case, I could go to Tyranitar on the Blissey, get a Dragon Dance, and I could have opted to trade there, but I decided not to, instead go just to Quagsire. Maybe force this Swampert to switch out again and get more Spikes chip, so that it's not actually a trade for my Tyranitar anymore if I go for it. But I guess the sort of line that I took, this Swampert ended up getting all of its HP back anyway, so we will HP Grass into the Lofaphora, the Blissey. Are these all, like... I'm not sure what the naming scheme for Wild Rumpus is here. I know that he has a lot of, like, the same names for a lot of the same Pokemon. Like, I think, Starmie's Astrophytum, which I think is some taxonomical term for a starfish, I should say. Kind of interesting. Oh, there's the Astrophytum right there. I go to Moltres, trying to punish the Skarm for staying in and spiking, but instead we get the Starmie, which is a really bad matchup for me, but I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I could live a Surf if this is a defensive Starmie, and the Starmie is so incentivized to go for a spin here because you have 3 hazards up on your side. What if I just stay in with the Moltres and get a bunch of HP grass damage? And I do, and I get a bunch of that damage there, which is really nice for me. I'll go to Skarmory, predicting my opponent to just want to switch out, which maybe was a bad prediction, because now I lose the Skarmory, and now there's no spikes. So a Superman team, this is not, even if you think that El Clásico is Superman, because I'm not going to have the spikes advantage going into the end game here. In fact, this Skarmory is just going to set up another layer, which is going to put some pressure on my Tyranitar and my Quagsire. Yeah, you never heard that one before, putting the big pressure on Quagsire. Although I do think that Quagsire got a lot of love in the Gen 7 metagame. Or maybe it was Gastrodon, actually. It was probably actually Gastrodon. They're so similar in their role that you could use either one to some degree, but in any case. I go for a double edge into this bird, trying to catch the Swampert switching in, but Wild Rumpus calls me out there and goes for a roar, which is not ideal. Now I'm in some big trouble. I'll go for a boom on Gengar just to lower this Blissey. We might be in a spot now where we can kill it with anything, although we probably don't kill it with Moltres, so we have to be careful if we end up going to Moltres. That we don't let the Blissey handle this. My Quagsire has dodged every Toxic this game. This has been kind of good for me. But assuming my opponent's just simply going to protect, I'm going to start setting up the curses. I think that was the first time I had revealed it. I go for an Earthquake there. If I get a crit, I could kill the Swampert, but mostly just to get some damage to keep it low. The Gengar is going to come in here. If it has a Grass-type move, then Quagsire is completely cooked. I also don't have a great move to just hit the Gengar, but it's going to reveal Taunt, so last move is most likely Ice Punch, so I don't have to worry about that too much. I will stay in and get a Flamethrower off to put the Gengar at half HP, which might be good enough to help my Quagsire 1v1 in there. I think that was worth trading some of that Moltres HP for. If I got crit or parried, though, that would have been really bad. In any case, I can go for Rest, and Ice Punch is not even going to 3-hit KO me, so I'm in a decent spot. It might not even 4-hit KO me, which could afford me a turn to get a Curse or an Ice Beam. But the Gengar is simply just going to stay in. Not do very much. Goes for Toxic, which is a little bit of a strange click. Maybe assuming that my Quagsire would be faster, but I think you kind of knew that it wasn't. In any case, gets the Toxic off, and I get a crit Ice Beam, which is great for me because I don't have to deal with this Skarmory like trying to Toxic stall me. With Rapid Spin, Recover, and Surf, I'm not confident that this Starmie has a great move to hit me, but it does reveal to have Psychic. So, yeah, it's a good thing that I went for Earthquake. I do think, though, you have to think about this contextually, right? Like, yes, most of the time, the last move is Thunder Wave on the Starmie, but if it's going to come in versus Quagsire, and it's only, like, its only move to hit me is Rapid Spin, then that just doesn't make sense, right? It has to have some sort of coverage move, and I figured that it was going to be Ice Beam, and I would live it, and then I could probably Earthquake and maybe get the KO back, and I end up getting it with the help of Sand. But the Starmie, alas, it did not have like HP Grass or something that would have been more threatening. Psychic is still pretty good damage, but not going to survive. Now Gengar comes in, goes for a Will-O-Wisp, which is a strange click. I thought maybe it would go for Ice Punch or Taunt, and my opponent notes that that was a costly misclick, which, yes, that was definitely a costly misclick. Had my Quagsire been taunted there, I would not have been able to get the rest. I would have basically had to sack the whole Quagsire, and then I would have needed to like game very, very hard with this Tyranitar to maybe win versus the Gengar and the Swampert. But now I can simply just stay asleep with the Quagsire to not incur the wrath of Toxic from this Swampert, who does reveal to have Ice Beam, so it's not just a Mono Pert. Swampert's gonna astutely go for Protect on the turn that I wake up. I can go for an Earthquake to keep the Swampert low, but I want to stay asleep whenever the Gengar could possibly come in, because Taunt is the only thing that can really stop my Quagsire from staying healthy. So if I rest before the Gengar comes in, I can't get taunted and stopped from resting. My opponent's going to go for Protect, which, I mean, kind of doesn't really matter. I guess Protect is the least valuable PP. But because my opponent hasn't been slamming me with so many Ice Beams this go around, I can go for another Curse. And then that affords me the damage to just KO the Swampert. I get Toxic for my troubles, but I'm high enough with my... I'm high enough in HP that I don't mind if the Gengar goes for Taunt. And if my opponent ever switches out of the Gengar, I can simply just rest the Quagsire. Monstera, the Tyranitar will come in, go for a Focus Punch. Probably a BKC Tar, but I have +2 defense and will eat that quite well. I'm going to go for Earthquake so that I can hit the Tyranitar for good damage. If it's going to try to do something like play for a crit on Earthquake, I can limit the turns that it is allowed to do that. And then I can simply just Ice Beam twice, take out the Gengar because well, I freeze it, but it doesn't really matter because the sand damage takes it out. And then essentially I can just go for well, I can Earthquake the Blissey, and then I can go for a Rest and basically win. Except I get crit, which, okay, fair enough. But Aerodactyl should still win this. Now, if it was a DD Tar, that could have been kind of dangerous for me. I maybe would have lost in such a case. But Focus Punch and DD are... they're not incompatible, but like you don't see them on the same set because I mean, Focus Punch does like the opposite of what you want out of your DD Tar, which is makes you move slowly, so you don't get your move off, which is I mean antithetical to the idea of DD Tar. In any case, that has been some gaming with El Clásico using Quagsire rather than Swampert. I may put out another video looking at a slightly different Quagsire team. I did happen to run it. I ran into a lot of like notable people on ladder while playing. One of them being Z Panther, who I don't have the replay for because I didn't realize that it was a Z Panther alt. But Z Panther hit me up in DMs and said, "Oh, have you thought about this idea with Quagsire?" And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't." Maybe I'll be showing that off in a future video. Let me know in the comments if you want to see more Quagsire gaming. Or if you don't want to see Quagsire gaming, then let me know that too. Then maybe I won't waste my time. But in any case, Quagsire has been so fun, and I thought it was going to be really bad, but you know what? It's honestly not that bad. I mean, yes, in many cases, Swampert is just better. And Swampert can do this curse set too if you want to try it with Swampert. But if you're going to do it with Swampert, I would recommend you have a slightly better plan into Suicune. Because, yeah, Suicune's going to murderize this team if you have a Swampert instead of a Quag. But in any case, that has been it for this video, and we will see you all for whatever the next video is.